Hail thee well, and welcome all. I'm the Jake of all trades, and this is episode 4 of my Avatar Campaign Journal series. Last episode, my party was in the village of Cavo, and there they discovered that the villagers were being attacked every night by a roaming band of armadillo lions. They quickly solved the mystery of why the armadillo lions were attacking, and they also managed to transport the armadillo lions to a new region in which they could habitate, so that they would be safe from the villagers and the villagers would be safe from them. With that problem solved, they're now making their way to the large Earth Kingdom metropolis of Dao Sun. And I had them roll some perception checks as they were flying into the city. I had a whole list of details that I was going to give them anyway, but I rolled some checks just to get a general idea of how well the party was paying attention in character, if you know what I mean. And for the obvious details, the ones I just straight away gave them, no matter what they rolled, I was just like, okay. And they know that the city is very, very wealthy. They can tell that right away based on a lot of things. There's a huge ornate statue of the local governor in the center of the city, and it's very, very large, and it's very well painted, and it's even been gilded with actual gold in some regions. There's a huge stone bridge that's spanning this large river, and I'll be showing a map over here so that you get an idea of what I'm talking about, in this river. And it's a very large stone bridge, and it looks like there are also a huge set of walls that surround the city. And these were some of the subtler details, and only a few of the people really picked up on them because they rolled well enough. First of all, there was a really huge Earth Kingdom population within Dao Sun. Mostly Earth Kingdom citizens, like people with Earth Kingdom traits. Not a lot of Fire Nation people, air nomads, waterbenders, or Water Nation people like that. There were also the only air nomads, Water Tribe folk, or Fire Nation people you saw were typically as like artisans or vendors of some of the nicer upscale shops, like the more expensive looking shops. And in addition to that, they also noticed that there was quite a few armed patrols, a lot of guards strolling around the city. And these guards also, they did have quite a bit of prejudice, it seemed, towards outsiders as well. You could, on a low flyover, they could, maybe see a group of guards who were hassling someone with Water Tribe robes or something like that. So those were their first impressions as they're entering the city. And like I said, most of the people are only aware of that it's a very nice, clean-looking city, very, very, very wealthy. Lots of money flowing in and out of this city. And a few of the other players, I think Sindal might have been one of the people to pick up on the subtle racism present within this city. Flying into the city, the party quickly spots a large procession making its way down the streets, and this procession catches their eye because there appear to be several standard bearers bearing banners with Phang's family crest on them, the Yang family crest. Yes, I did not mispronounce. His name is Phang Yang. And so they're bearing the Yang family crest, and it's quite a long procession of people. There's some palanquins and just like a lot of people, a few armed guards near the fronts and the back ends of this procession as well. And the party gets the impression that this is something that they should check out. So Pema brings down her air bison Popo, and they make a landing, and they get off, and they see what all the hullabaloo is about. They find that the procession is led by Phang's family butler, Chan. And it appears that his master and Phang's father, Liu Yang, has just learned of their approach through some messages sent from nearby villages. And this has prompted him to immediately send out this procession to go and greet the party, as it were, as soon as they arrived at town. And it appears that the party arrived just before this procession could arrive entirely, essentially. So, the party arrives, and they encounter this procession, and Chan is very excited they managed to catch them in time, and he's like, oh, I'm so glad that we caught you. Please, there's not a moment to lose. Everybody, please hop inside a palanquin, we will take you back to the Yang Estates, and your father is expecting you. It's very important we get there quickly. So while this is all happening, they all begin climbing into these palanquins and stuff, and then a couple guards come up from behind some of these procession members, and they point towards Sindal. They point towards Sindal, and they go over, and they're like, hey, can we talk to you for a moment, citizen? And he's like, okay, I'm just about to do a thing. Like, can we make it quick? And they're like, don't worry, it won't take long. And they say that, or they ask him if he is Sindal from the city of Jing, several days away. And he replies, well, I think he tries to bluff his way out of it, but I think he rolled very poorly on his bluff check. And they rolled pretty well on their sense motive check. And so they were like, you know what, I think you are, you're coming with us now because we think you are that guy. And you're wanted for questioning related to events that happened in Jing City some nights ago. I think it's probably close to like maybe 2 weeks or so at this point, almost. Probably, I think it's about 2 weeks. So anyway, they essentially arrest Sindal, or they escort him to the barracks for questioning, in which he is arrested. I mean, no matter what he replies to their questions, they're arresting him essentially. And it's a whole laundry list of bullshit, like, that I just tried to drum up. You know, I was trying to find a way to, get rid of their money, because I feel like I gave them way too much. If you've been watching from the beginning, I feel like they have an inordinate amount of wealth for their character level and status in this world. And B, I also I didn't know that this player was taking the game seriously, and I wanted to let him know that there were repercussions for his actions. If he does something illegal and he's not very, very careful about how it's done, then stuff is going to happen about it. And a little of it also might have been some leftover aggression from the previous session, and that's a bad GM move on my part. I shouldn't have done what I did here. But I wrote it, and you'll see later on that I wrote this entire scenario of him getting arrested with all of these charges with an escape route in mind. There was an escape route all along, and it was a pretty obvious one. So we'll get to that when we get to that. But for the meantime, this whole reason he's been arrested is also for, like, plot reasons. If you've been watching the videos, you know that while they were in Jing City, they sort of made an enemy out of the governor, who they never actually spoke to, Governor Loka. And he actually, like I mentioned, is very influential. He belongs in, like, in a secret organization that holds a lot of power throughout the Four Kingdoms. And because of that, he is able to throw these charges at this character from hundreds of miles away and actually kind of have them stick. Like, it actually kind of works. So, in addition to that, like I said before, it was to teach the player. I was trying to communicate that this was like, you had to take it seriously, because I was taking it seriously, and I wanted them to take it seriously. I wanted that to be clear. If you give me a moment here, I'll pull out the list of charges that I actually wrote up for this character. So, Sindal's charges were 1 count of attempted theft. I think that happened initially when they took him down the first time. When he was trying to get the layout of the room, he made a very obvious grab at the coin purse, and with the intention of getting caught. So there was a count of attempted theft. There are 2 counts of arson. There are 3 counts of assault of a city guard. They pretty much pinned every assault of a city guard on him because he was the only person that they really had that they could take it out on. Aside from Asula, who, like, I mean, if you've been watching, escaped. She's not there anymore, so they're trying to find the next person on the list who's, like, actually within reach of grabbing. 1 count of fleeing the scene of a crime. 1 count of vandalism. I'll get to that. 1 count of aiding and abetting a convicted traitor. That was Asula, the convicted traitor. 1 count of evading and escaping a prison sentence. The second time he went down, he actually had he had gotten a sentence. You were like, nope, you're serving a sentence. So they charged him for that as well, and he has to serve that time as well. And the total came out to like 16 months and 3 days, or 10 months. And then he could pay off some of his fines, and the fines that he could pay off to get rid of those 3 extra months, essentially, he had to pay out like 85 gold and 5 silver in, like, restitution damages. And his vandalism charge came from his arson charge, actually. They say that there was a statue in the center of the city, and it was singed from the fire from the city barracks, which were right there near the town square, and they claimed that was the count of vandalism. And when my players asked, like, vandalism, and then I was like, oh yeah, the town statue got singed by the fire, like, everybody kind of laughed at that. So that was kind of a fun little moment. So those were Sindal's charges. So the party makes it to the Yang family estate, and they are quickly shown into the main house on the estate, and there a huge wave of servants come up, and they quickly drag all the players off into their own random rooms, and then they quickly they start measuring them, and then tailoring and cleaning them. They quickly throw them into a bath, although after the measurements have been made. And while one set of servants is like cleaning everyone in their own individual baths, there's also another set of servants who are tailoring a specific outfit for them to wear at the banquet tonight. That is what all of the hullabaloo is about. The players come to realize there is a banquet that is they will be attending tonight. And Liu Yang, Phang's father, has not been seen this entire time as well. I made a note of that, and as soon as I said it, Phang was then like, "Hey, Chan, how come?" That's his butler. "Chan, how come we haven't seen my dad around anywhere?" And he's like, "Oh, well, he's probably off at the banquet already, or he's, hobnobbing with the other people. You know how your father can be." And with that, they are kind of left to just get ready for the party. With the party squeaky clean and resplendently dressed, they hardly have a moment to even appreciate how good they look before more servants rush them off and throw them back into the palanquins, in which the palanquin bearers take them down across town to the southern district, the mansion district, a very, very nice region where a bunch of mansions are located. And it's in one of these mansions that the party that they are going to, the banquet that they are going to, is being held. It is on Governor Kami's estate. She's the governor of the entire region, and Fang's father Liu is kind of like he's kind of like works for her in a way. She manages the whole region, but that's a pretty big job, and so she employs several trusted people below her, several other trusted families, to manage some of these affairs while she's taking care of some of her other duties, because she's also a general in the Earth Kingdom. Oh no, sorry. Scratch that. She's a commander in the Earth Kingdom Army, and so she's got a lot of duties that need her oversight there as well. And so she's not around a lot of the time, and she needs people that she can trust to take care of stuff. And Liu Yang is one of those people, and so that's why he is so wealthy. So it's being held on her estate, though. She's supposed to be nearby. She was supposed to be attending the banquet, and it's a massive mansion in the South District. And as they approach, they make note that they can hear the party. They can hear the amounts of the volume of people laughing and talking and just general merriment from a distance before they even see it. And as they get closer, they can see that there's rows and rows of palanquins and carriages and lots of very, very fancily dressed people walking in and out of this very, very large, ornate mansion. Entering the banquet hall, I gave the party a huge description of the room that they were now in. It was a very unique building, and I wanted to communicate the lavishness and extravagance of the space, truly give it to them. I wanted to express every little detail and sort of give them every little nook and cranny so that they could really, really appreciate what they were sitting in. And that required me to do quite a bit of work in terms of writing out what this room looked like. That actually takes quite a bit of work if you've ever sat down to try to do it before. Describing a room, especially a very, very lavishly decorated one from ceiling to floor, can be quite challenging. But I'll give you what I have. Immediately, they see a large crystal and silver chandelier that hangs from the ceiling, and it's hanging directly below a beautifully detailed mural of Avatar Po, and he was the last earthbending avatar in the cycle, and it's actually his statue in the Jing City that was singed by Sindal's fire. That was his vandalism charge, actually. So I also included a couple little checks here. I had them roll, some more perception checks again, like I did earlier. And that was the description they got no matter what. But if they rolled really well, I also told them that it was a very, very old mural, at least from what they could tell. It was very, very worn from age. And they could also tell that it hadn't been restored and or maintained in quite some time. Gold edging along the ceiling draws the eye downwards to very, very large side windows that are on either end of this large banquet hall. And windows are pretty important. They're very, very expensive in medieval settings and also in the Avatar setting, coincidentally. I decided, considering it was essentially medieval tech, that windows should also be pretty expensive. So that's a sign of wealth, essentially. And around those windows, they could see that there was a lot of wallpaper, very ornate and very expensive wallpaper. Any wallpaper in this world also would be very expensive. I know those are sort of things that we take for granted now, but back then, that would have been a huge amount of wealth and resources it would have required to create that thing, to create that product. So it's another sign of Kami's wealth. And behind, on the back wall, there are no windows, but rather a very large mural of Kami's mother, Hama, who was the previous governor of the region. And again, I had them roll another check here, or at least I used the check, or I might have used the check from the previous one. But again, there was a check involved, and if they rolled well enough, they could notice that this mural on the back wall here, the mural of the last governor, was, although it was several decades old, it depicted the governor when she was quite young. It has been incredibly well maintained since it had been put up, apparently. In contrast to the mural of Avatar Po on the ceiling, which was very faded. And you could take this to be like maybe it's a sign of, hey, well, the one on the wall was easier to maintain than the one on the ceiling. But there was actually some different stuff at work there. It was sort of subtle, and I won't really get into it because it's not super important. Working our way down, gold trim on the back walls and around the windows draws the eye to the huge tiled dance floor with very intricate geometric designs tiled throughout it, with a large mosaic kind of style. And when you take a step back and you look at it for a few seconds, you realize that it's a large representation of the Earth Kingdom's seal. And along the sides of this region, there are large stone columns that support this massive structure around the edges of the dance floor. And seeing those, you can also see that there are 24 servants running around. And you suspect that there's probably more at the rate that they're scurrying. It's difficult to count them all at once. They're dressed in Earth Kingdom colors, golds and green, and they have little white hats that they're also wearing. And you can see that there's a bunch of them around the tables and several that are also near the doors, and a lot of them that are just hanging out around the wings, bringing food and drink in and out from the back room. And they seem to be serving hors d'oeuvres and wine as well. And I also had them roll another check here, a little perception check, to make note of the servants. And if you rolled well enough, then you found out that they appeared that they were all Earth Kingdom citizens. They didn't appear to be any Fire Nation citizens or any Water Tribers or anyone from the Air Nomads. It was strictly Earth Kingdom. It didn't look like they were letting anyone else in. Now able to get a real clear view of this very, very large banquet hall, and they've taken in all of this exterior, stuff around the edges, they're able to get an eye on like what's actually happening in here. They see that there's about 100 guests milling around, and they can notice immediately, based on the colors that people are wearing, that almost all of these people are Earth Kingdom citizens. There appears to be a very small percentage of people, maybe like 7 or 8, just a handful of Fire Nation diplomats and dignitaries, perhaps. But otherwise, it seems to be that this is like an Earth Kingdom party of some kind. And all of the guests are dressed very, very exquisitely, very, very nicely. I made a point to tell the characters, or the players, how well their characters were dressed before they entered the party. And then I did that so that I could do this. I could tell them that even though they look like they're dressed nicer than they have ever been dressed in their entire lives, they feel kind of out of place and sort of like not even well enough suited to pass through here. Like everyone pretty obviously recognizes that they are wearing much cheaper clothing than what everyone else is wearing. I think except for Phang Yang, who actually would have had a lot of these nice clothes to begin with, and his family would have blended in pretty well like that. And so yeah, he would probably look pretty nice. But the rest of the party, even though they were resplendently dressed, as I mentioned earlier, they do feel like they are quite out of place despite these fancy new clothes. They also see that there are 3 long tables set up around the edges and at the back of the dance hall, and they're about 50 feet long and about 7 feet wide. And there's 3 of them, and they're shaped in a U. So there's like 2 on the sides of the room, and then there's 1 right here at the back. All right, considering you come in from the bottom here. And at those tables, the back table sits on a small raised section of stone, like a half a foot or so above the other tables and everyone else on the dance floor. And at that table, they can see a bunch of very fancily dressed people as well. Among those people, they see, finally, Liu Yang. They see Fang's father, finally. And they also see his mother, whose name I forget, because I had her be really quiet and submissive, and she didn't speak unless she was spoken to, and that was kind of her personality. And so they see him up there, and but Liu, on the other hand, I gave a pretty adequate description of. He's very boisterous, kind of portly, rotund fellow with very healthy appetites for food and drink. And he is also very, very well dressed. One of the more well dressed people at this party, actually. It was at that point that I ended my very long description, and I finally let my players loose to kind of play around the party. And the first person to say anything was Phang, and he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go talk to my dad." And I was like, "Yeah, that makes perfect sense. He's sitting right there. You saw him right away, of course." So Phang walks up to his father, Liu, and Liu is immediately, of course, very excited to see him. He's glad that the procession caught him. He's glad that, his friends were here, and they all, were able to get cleaned up before they made it to the party. That's a pretty big thing as well. And, it's pretty happiness. They hug a little bit, and Phang gets a little bit of a feel for his father, because this is the first time that I've introduced his father as a character. The player wrote his father into the story, or into his backstory, and then, when they were passing through town, of course, I was like, well, hey, you've got a father in your backstory, and he said that he was like a governor of the region or something. Well, he's not quite the governor, but he's still in the region, and he's still pretty wealthy, and so we should probably talk about him a bit. So, he speaks with Liu, and Liu tells him a few things, actually, a few interesting things, like plot-related things. Some quest hooks, actually. Quest hooks. He tells them that Governor Kami has actually been having some trouble with a nearby village, the village of La Ming. And it turns out that a wild animal or something, as he says it, a wild animal has been troubling that village for several weeks, and they have been unable to stop it, and they've petitioned Governor Kami here in Dao Sun, the largest city in the region, for help. And the situation was tasked to him, but he's like, hey, you guys seem like, I've heard that you've done pretty well taking care of this other stuff, and since you're headed that way, maybe you wouldn't mind just, helping out your old man, doing him a solid and taking care of that, And Fang's like, oh, God, all right, He begrudgingly accepted. I don't know if that was in character or out of character, but he definitely seemed like he was okay. His father was pretty drunk, he was pretty boisterous, like I said, so very loud, lots of dramatic hand movements, lots of rocking and stuff when I was speaking in character, spoke in a larger voice, bigger, jovial. Oh, Fang, it's a pleasure to see you, my son. And, lots of back slapping and stuff like that. And he seemed very confident, though. He's like, I'm sure it'll be no problem for you. The villagers, they seem kind of frightened, but it can't be anything too terrible. He gives them 10 gold for expenses. Those of you who have been watching along know that I feel like I gave my players a little bit too much wealth early on, and I have come to regret it a little bit. And but I was like, man, this guy's rich, and they're doing him a solid. He would totally have some money that he was willing to give them, even if it was only a little bit. And so I decided, hey, it's just a little bit. It's just 10 GP, which is still quite an extravagant sum actually for this world, but not really compared to what they had. Anyway, he said that he was also going to send a message after Fang accepted. He was going to send a message to this village, La Ming, ahead of them, so that they would know to expect them when they came. And he says that it's actually not super important though. After he gets Fang to agree, he seems more interested in trying to keep Fang and his friends in the city for another day or two before they go and do that quest. And so he's like, you can wait a day or two though. Family's more important though, right? You haven't seen me in how long, and I haven't gotten to know your friends yet. You have to hang out in the city for the day tomorrow, and I will be sure to show you and your friends a great time. And this was kind of setting up the second part of the session as well, because it turned out, it seemed like this was going to be going quite a long time, longer than I prepared, and so I was like, hey, this is probably going to be a two-parter. So I set that up as well. So while Phang was speaking with his father, the rest of the players were free to explore the space and kind of see what was going on. And I had been encouraging them to roll gather information checks. For those of you listening along from the beginning, it's a Pathfinder-based game, which means gather information isn't a skill anymore, it's knowledge local. But gosh darn it, I loved gather information so much that I just included it on my skill list. I decided that knowledge local is something different. That's like knowing where the best tavern in town is, or knowing what the local features are, or historical landmarks and stuff like that. That's what knowledge local is. Gather information is more for like the gathering information. And maybe it's more of a diplomacy sort of thing in Pathfinder. But again, I liked gather information so much that it was gather information. So they rolled gather information checks. And depending on how they rolled and what they wanted to listen to, they had the potential to pick up on some rumors that I was spreading around. Everyone at this party is talking about something, and there's lots of conversations flying around. But 3 of them in particular held interest to the players, and I wanted to make note of those. The 3 conversations they could listen to were either conversations about the new avatar that had been spotted in Hun Ro. So that's like, down the road plot stuff, because that's what their main quest right now is, still to make it to Hun Ro so that they can investigate these avatar sightings. Another one of the things that people were talking about, one of the conversations, were territory disputes between the air nomads and the Fire Nation on the island of Nanzu. And then the third one was they could hear more about the Siwang Desert and the virulent new disease that has become known in that region. So I gave them the option of which one they wanted to listen to, and I can't remember who listened to what, because that was over a year ago. So I'm just going to tell you what I had written, though, for each one of those things. And depending on how well they rolled, they got more information. So in some of those checks, actually, they were quite a bit higher. Some of them were higher than others. Like the information on the new avatar, the new avatar information was much easier to come across than the territorial dispute information was. And that was easier to come across than the information on the Siwang Desert. And that was to kind of represent how far away all these places are from each other, and how the information kind of gets watered down after those long distances. So the first one was the Avatar, DC 9 through 14. I hear that the new Avatar is in a small village, defending it from bandits or some local factions. And then DC 20, you hear that, and then you also hear that the new Avatar hasn't mastered all of the elements yet. They've only mastered Earth, Fire, and Air, which is exactly where Avatar Oshi left off in her training, actually. She never mastered water, so that's an interesting little kind of like a teaser sort of thing there. For the players at least, it kind of is like a little, is it this, is it that sort of thing, keeping it unclear. After that, there was the territory disputes. DC 15 through 19, there's territory disputes between the Air Nomads and Fire Nation on Nanzu. Apparently, the Fire Nation city Nanzu is growing faster than the Air Nomad Temple is, and the Air Nomads are actually being pushed off of some of their lands to accommodate this boom in the Fire Nation population. And that is what is causing these disputes. These farming lands are being taken over by the Fire Nation. And if you rolled a 25, you could find out, and this is like super far ahead spoiler stuff, like that there was actually an activist group within this city of Nanzu, or on this island, and it was led by an individual called Yan Phang. More on him if you continue listening for several more weeks. After that, we had the Siwang Desert and the disease out there. It turns out that Kami's forces are in the Siwang Desert if you rolled a DC 20 to 24. I made it pretty difficult. And while they're out there, they're looking for the cure of the disease. That's why they're out there, or the cause of the disease. They're trying to find the cause of it, and so if they can figure out how to what's causing it, they think that they might be able to stop it. And if you roll the DC 30, which is essentially a natural 20, because I don't think anyone invested in the skill like I thought they would. But DC 30, you find out that this disease from the Siwang Desert appears to be spiritual in nature. And that's like way down the road. That's the stuff we haven't even gotten to yet. So more on that in quite some time. The interesting thing about all of these rumors was that up to this point, rumors had been kind of unreliable. You couldn't trust the information that you were getting. But at this party, for some reason, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but as I was reading through it, I had kind of came to the conclusion that, most of the stuff is pretty much true. All of the information I was providing to them was true. There were no red herrings in this information, which kind of made it super valuable. This is like the first real information the party has gotten on some of this stuff that they can actually trust. Though, I suppose they don't know that they can trust it yet. It was around this point that I introduced a new NPC to the campaign. I had everyone kind of looking around the room, and it was Pema who spotted first, of course. Well, it was Pema who spotted. I had Pema looking around the room, and she spotted her father, actually. She's not the only one, or Phang wasn't the only one with a father at this party, apparently. She sees her father, who is, his name is Hosen, and he was a member of the original Team Avatar. And she quickly runs over to him, and she, gives him a big hug, and, says how excited she is to see him, and he's also excited to see her. He was actually hoping that he would see her. It appears that Liu Yang is not the only person who knew that the party was going to be arriving here today. Somehow, Hosen had heard about the party's arrival as well, and he was actually very anxious to speak with them. He says that he needs to speak with them, but he can't speak with them here. He says that they can talk tomorrow if they meet him at a small tea shop called the Jade Rose. That's the Jade Rose. It's a very upscale, very nice little establishment. Think of like Uncle Iroh's tea shop while he was in Boston, say. It's kind of like that. And that's about where the session ended for the night. I let them run around the banquet for a little while longer and, talk with anyone or say anything or do anything that they wanted to do. I tried to impromptu describe a very large feast of food that came out for them at some point, because that was the one thing I hadn't prepared for the banquet hall, was the actual banquet. Go figure. And after they had kind of tired themselves out and ran out of stuff to do, the party died down and they went back to the Yang estate for the night. Then, after their characters were safely in bed and asleep, I had all of the players at the table roll me a percentile dice. I don't know exactly how I planned to use these numbers. I just kind of assumed that I would figure out what I needed to do with them and how. And so I had them roll these percentile dice. I knew what it was going to do, though. Whatever they rolled was going to determine who was going to be the avatar. And it's pretty fun. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to tell you exactly how I did it next video. But in the meantime, I'm going to leave you with an image of their percentile rolls. And I'll let you, maybe think about how you would have done it. How would you have decided how you wanted to be the avatar? I don't know. I thought percentiles were a good way to kind of keep it loose and to represent, how the avatar doesn't necessarily want to be the avatar. Maybe someone who really wants to be the avatar isn't the avatar, but then someone who doesn't want it is shouldered with the burden, because that's how they're born. When we get to the next episode, though, I'm going to tell you exactly how I did it and exactly who became the avatar. And I will also be relating to you the rest of their adventures here in Dao Sun. They spent another whole day of activities in the city. They were doing all kinds of stuff. They went to a few restaurants, they went to a zoo, they went to a play, and then there was even a little bit of combat at the end of the night. So stay tuned, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for listening.